Do you ever see a successful woman on your feed or in a magazine and think, wow, it must be nice to have it so easy? Well, think again. Behind that glossy cover or smiling face is a ton of hard work, countless failures, and endless learning experiences. I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and I'm here to tell you that success isn't a walk in the park. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. That's why I created Superwomen, a podcast that peels back the varnish and gets into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make it as a woman in today's world. From luminaries and game changers to women you've never heard of but should, this podcast is here to inspire you to take your next leap, no matter how daunting it may seem. We'll explore the sacrifices these women have made, the highs and lows they've experienced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn from some of the most successful women out there, join me on Superwomen. Together, we'll uncover the stories behind the successes and prove that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. Hey everyone, you're listening to Superwomen. Today's guest is Neha Kumar, the co-founder and COO of Full Glass Wine Company. We actually met through Everything Female Founder Collective. Neha has spoken at my events several times and is an incredible teacher of everything from her roots in finance and banking to how she became a serial entrepreneur. We go deep on what it takes to continue despite all, how courage is really key in making sure you can optimize your success, and also resilience. Not only that, we dive into motherhood and how to not balance it all, because I don't believe in a word like balance, but how to make it all as aligned as possible. Take a listen. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited I get to have you on. I've listened to you many a time at our Female Founder Collective events. As I said before we started recording, I could listen to you talk all day because you are such an excellent speaker, and everything you say, I'm like, yes, the gospel. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca.
So we met through Allie because of Female Founder Collective, but I want to talk about your career. Before Full Glass Wine Co., you were in finance. So I'd like to go back to that area and what were you doing specifically? And how did you know it was time to get out?
It's so interesting because so many people think that you need to in life have a direct career path. And the way for me that it's worked out really well is when I was in high school, I kept on trying to figure out my whole entire life. And it was, I was pre-med at the time. And which is interesting, in high school, you even determine that you want to be pre-med. I was taking colleges and classes while I was in high school and doing all these different things. And my biology teacher, I had AP biology, and he said to me, Neha, it's not always about what you want to do. It's about what you want to do next. What is the next thing that you want to do? And take one step and take another step and go from there. And I really took that home, and it really hit me. Because a lot of times we try to over-plan out things in our life, and you never know what's going to happen in life. I live in Los Angeles. We know kind of the situation that's occurred here as well, and you think you have everything figured out, and life kind of comes at you. And so when I graduated undergrad, I worked for a couple years, and I went back to business school. After business school, I went into banking. When I was in banking, I ended up seeing how a lot of these people were performing and how great they were doing in the startup space. I was young in banking and I was doing a great job, but I thought, I learned a lot after this, but I thought, oh, I'm so smart. I'm smarter than so many of these people who have these companies and they're excelling phenomenally, and I could do better than them. So I ended up quitting my job in banking and I went out to venture in the startup world. And it was not like I had a slice of humble pie. It was like I had humble pies, multiple thrown at me every single day. It was the most humbling experience overall for me to kind of go through that experience of looking to start my own startup. I was doing a technology, it was financial planning for the masses type of a tool. And I had no tech background, and I went out to go and do that. And it was really, really hard. And you really learn grit. You learn perseverance, you learn resilience. And I also learned what I'm not good at. And what I'm not good at doing is taking a company from, 0 to 3, 0 to 5 million in revenue. What I'm really good at doing, because I come from a structured background, is to essentially take great ideas that have good enough kind of Play-Doh there and figuring out how to scale those ideas. And so after banking, I had my own startup, didn't really work out the way I would have liked, worked on it for just under 2 years. But it was good for me as a human. It made me a lot more compassionate. It made me a lot more empathetic. You don't always know what's going on for other people, and things can be challenging.
When you left finance and you went out and I'm assuming you raised money, you had enough to survive for 2 years. Did you ever have moments where you're like, gosh, I just want to go to like the cushy paycheck and the consistency? Or did you already know, like, I'm doing this no matter what? And if it's not this, it will be something else?
It was the latter.
Okay.
And it was, I am going to make this work no matter what. I had just read, there's a book. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it used to be called The 16 Principles of Success. My dad actually gave me the book. He had read it in the early 70s. And in there, they talk about, and I'm sure you've heard this story too before because it's in multiple management books, but there's a concept of, burn the ships.
Burn the ships?
Burn the ships. So you haven't heard, okay, so it's basically if you're going off to war and you take your whole army and you come on ships to land. I think it was a Spanish conqueror who ended up saying this. As soon as they landed on shore and they were about to go to war, to battle, he said, burn the ships. He made everyone burn the ships, which meant there's no way to retreat. You have to win.
Wow.
And that was my mentality at that time is I'm going down this path. I'm burning the ships. I have to figure it out. And I didn't know what it was going to look like, but Rebecca, there's something so exciting and amazing about figuring it out and seeing what's going to happen. And in the entrepreneurial space, you learn a lot of resourcefulness.
Tons. When you figured out, okay, I'm not good at starting and growing to 1 to 5 million, but you know how to take these crumbs of ideas and make those grow. How did you figure that out?
I figured it out because I was failing constantly. So it's hard in the startup space. Like you need so many different skills. There's so many different people that are involved. And I just knew then, again, I come from a really structured finance, accounting, banking type of a background. And there's a certain type of person that you see who's able to take something and just run with it. And I started to notice I am really good at taking, again, a certain amount of Play-Doh and then taking things and scaling. I started to work with various different startups. And I think that's kind of where my biology teacher's mentality really came back to me again was it's not what you want to do, but what do you want to do next? And so I started to actually just reach out to various different startups and start to consult and work for them. I'd work as an advisor, I'd work as a mentor, I would help. And then I would see with a lot of these startups, what they really needed was someone to come in and help figure out the internal infrastructure. So I worked at various different startups. One was a direct-to-consumer wine company. I was there for a bit. Another one I ended up going to was a company called Create and Cultivate. Create and Cultivate had gone through, a bit of an interesting time back in 2017, 2018. And I knew the people who were the shareholders of the company at the time. Some of them were my family friends. And they said, listen, we really want to grow this business. We want to get it to scale. And then we want to get it to a sale. Would you be interested in coming on board? And I just had at that time, my first child. My son was 3 weeks old. I'll never forget. I was actively nursing. My son was colic. And I went to go and meet with still the current founder, but then the CEO of the company. And it seemed like a great place for me to be able to, take what they currently had that was in place, get the infrastructure and everything else going, and then get the company ready for an exit. So when my son was 7 weeks old, I ended up joining the company. But here's an interesting thing. And I've talked about this a little bit with other people as well, but, I had a really difficult time after I had my first kid. I had really bad postpartum. And if somebody would have asked me, 6, 7 years ago, what do you think of postpartum? I would have said, well, and I'm a type A person, people should just push through it. Right. What is this thing they're talking about? It really is a chemical imbalance. Like it's a chemical thing in your brain, and it's really hard to deal with. For me, the best thing was when I started working at Create and Cultivate. It was a really hard time for me until I started working there. Within 2 days of working at the company, I started to find myself again and feel like myself. And the thing that's really interesting, Rebecca, is that when you take care of yourself and you take care of your needs and you do things where you're really good, you end up being more successful overall. So I joined Create and Cultivate. I was there for about a little over 2.5 years. And then we ended up scaling the business during those 2 years. And then we sold to a private equity firm in 2021. Yes, in 2021 now. So a few years ago.
I thought it was pre-COVID that you sold it. No?
No, we sold it after COVID.
After COVID. Okay. Okay.
Or during COVID, whichever one you want to look at it. So it was one of the most challenging things because we went into the process in early 2020. I'll never forget. We had a couple meetings in the beginning of 2020 with some, potential people who are interested, some strategics in the business. And it was February time period or end of February, and people were just talking about COVID in some places. And when we ended up leaving the dinner, everybody said, "Oh, let's do elbow bumps instead of shaking hands or giving a hug," right? But it was a really, really interesting time period to be in a business like that.
So you're brought in to Create and Cultivate. You find yourself, and now you're going to scale the company and help oversee the acquisition by another company. At that moment or through any of that process where you're like, I'm here for the long haul, I want to see it through and stay, or you knew that once this was done, you were going to be on to your next, whatever it was?
I'd like to think that I really thought through that completely. Having said that, it's just one of those things of what's next. So what I like to really do is I used to think through before, Rebecca, that I need to have a 5-year, 10-year plan laid out. And I think it's fun to think through things that way, but it's more of what could things in life look like, not a full plan. What I really like to do is look at things in 6-month increments and say, okay, for the next 6 months, what are my key goals? What am I trying to focus on? And let me just go out there and do it. That for me has been very, very helpful of a strategy, because otherwise you start to get bombarded down with so many different things that could come into the picture that are going on. 6-month increments are very easy for your brain to take on, and it feels like it's a sprint. I'm a sprinter. Some people are marathon runners, and then you have some people are sprinters. I also think that there's certain periods of time in your life where you're going to be on a sprint. And there's certain periods of time in your life where you're going to have to look at life as a marathon. When you're a sprinter, it's just, let's go all in, let's figure this out, and let's get it going. And you want to understand too, we were an events company during a global pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, a sale for us was that's what I went into the company with, this is what we're looking to accomplish. Having said that, there were a lot of times where we just didn't know what was going to happen in 2020.
Well, your pivot was incredible. I was clearly, because I'm a fan, but I was just like, wow. And then you sold an events company when there could be no events, which is wild.
Yes. And we sold for a little over 8.5 times multiple on EBITDA, which was a pretty good premium for a company in that space, specifically at that time.
Yeah. So you touched on motherhood, but I definitely want to get into it, and then we'll go to your current gig. I think we're all in different phases or seasons, as they say. And so sometimes you're like, oh, I know how to do this phase of my life. Like up until probably 6 months ago, I had figured out how, we could all do things together as a family. Now it's sleepovers, games, one child gets left behind, another one's carted around, and I don't know. I'm encountering how do we keep this family unit as a unit when now everyone has very different needs? And you began to talk about it before we started recording, but throughout your work in entrepreneurship, what have you figured out and what have you not figured out?
There's always the concept of you don't know what you don't know. I call it Donkey Kong, don't know what you don't know. So I just don't know what I don't know yet. My kids are 6 and 4, but I'll tell you what I do know is that all of it has to work somehow in sync. When you're in the entrepreneurial space or you have your own business, there's no 9 to 5. There's no clocking in, clocking out. I remember when I had my first kid, somebody asked me, well, they should give you time off. And I'm like, who's they? Like, we're the they. I had my second pregnancy while I was at Create and Cultivate, and it was a pregnancy that was, unfortunately, it didn't make it to fruition. And then I also had my third pregnancy where my daughter was born while we were selling the company. But you just don't know what's going to all come up. But what I have figured out is you have to find a way to put everything together and make it work as one. And what I mean by that is there's no work or life. Everybody always talks about work-life balance. I think it's just all one. And certain times in your life, you lean into one area more than the other because that's the place that needs the time and energy and effort. I try to include my kids in things. So if we're doing a, work event, one time we had for a full glass wine, currently my son came and he's wearing a full glass wine sweater that we got made for him. So I include him in the conversation. So many people know what's going on. I meet with my son currently plays hockey. Ice hockey, and my controller's son plays hockey as well. So we'll bond over hockey. We'll be the hockey moms. We'll go to the rink. We'll talk about work on the weekends while we'll do a brainstorming session over there while our kids are playing, right? And our husbands are coaching them. But you find a way to get it all to work together. It's not always easy, but that for me has allowed me to be as efficient as possible. And then I teach undergrad as well. So my son's first public teaching experience, I brought him to my class. And it was amazing for him to be there in front of 70-something students in an auditorium style classroom. But now he knows Mama teaches, Mama's a teacher, right? And he did that when he was 4.5, about a year and a half ago or so. So for me, finding ways to incorporate my kids and my husband into my life has made all of this work.
How have you incorporated your husband into your life? Because mine sits next to me over there, but we don't talk all day. We are not incorporated into each other's lives at the moment.
I couldn't do it without him.
Yeah, same.
And one of it is, he always calls it that we have a seesaw. So it's like you're sitting on a seesaw. We have little kids, right? So playgrounds. So, there are certain points in time where one person's career is doing more than the other, and we have to help each other out. But it's more than just that. He helps me with my work. So if I have to go do, yesterday I was on a NBC for this TV show recording. So over the weekend, my husband picked out all my outfits, and we have fun with it. He's really good at clothing, which is interesting. A couple weeks ago, I was having a challenge with one of my employees. So I went to my husband, right? He works at a Deloitte, and it's a big company. And so they have a bit more structure and everything else in place. And so it's really helpful including him in. But in addition to that, I purposely try to include him into things that are fun. So if I'm going to a certain event, if there's somewhere to take him along to, because what I also want him to see is who I am in my world. And that allows him to have more respect for what it is that I'm doing. And not just respect, it's also an appreciation. And it's nice for me to feel heard from my husband, because as two people who have really intense careers and with little children, it's the little mannerisms that I get from him that make all the difference. And I noticed this a couple years ago where his body would almost sigh if I said I had another event or something else I had to go to. And even if he didn't say anything, I could feel it. And then that would start to cause negativity. And so I figured, what can I do to make something happen here? And so I thought, if I include him into the things I'm doing and allow him to see how much fun and exciting and great this could be for our household and our family, then I can get his buy-in. That book I was telling you about before too, the Think and Grow Rich, there's one thing in there that says in relationships in life, you got to go 100-0. A lot of people look at relationships as 50-50. What am I doing? What are you doing? This concept for me was really interesting, is that you just go 100%. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. You do what you need to do and you go 100%. And then it's almost like magic. how everything around you starts to connect. When you
Yeah.
work with a certain set of intention, it all starts to come together.
Yeah. I almost look at it like you're taking full responsibility for what you can control and own, and you're putting that out there, and then other people, they can feel it. And so they start giving or not, and then they're no longer in your life, right?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was talking to somebody about this before, and they basically said, Neha, it's always like you're doing taxes. You're writing people off. If someone's not.
It's true. I mean, I think life's too short. And as we've gotten older, I don't know how you feel, but like, I'm like, I don't have time for this. I don't need a negative person. Like up until I did the TV show, I had eliminated mostly all the negativity in my life. And then I said, let's just bring it all into that. Hey, my loyal listeners, it's Rebecca. Did you know that I have a Substack where I write about all of the materialistic things like my favorite sweatsuits or what I pack for my trips, all the things outside of my daily work and life that sort of just make things tick and that I love. So if you do enjoy reading, head over to substack.com/Rebecca Minkoff. Press the button to subscribe, support the cause, and I hope that with all of the busy things in your life, this brings you a little bit of shopping joy. What was the change to go from CNC to full glass? And how do you know that this is your last gig? Is this just another stop on the Neha career train?
So I'll give you a couple different things there. So basically, we went from Create and Cultivate to then the founder and I both left and we started a fund. So we were doing investments into CPG companies for about a year and a half, 2 years, fully deployed that fund. While we were doing that, this is what I mean by, like, I just think when you get out there in life and you put yourself out there, it's almost like opportunities start to present themselves. You just have to be ready and get out there in the world. My dad is a financial planner and he worked from home growing up, which now obviously is not novel, but back then it was a novel thing. Somebody works from home. On the weekends, my dad would get up and get ready and come downstairs. And he would get so upset with my younger sister and I and say, "Why are you wearing your pajamas roaming around the house?" And he would say, "Every morning you got to get up and you got to get ready and you got to get out there because you don't know what the day is going to bring." And that's how I look at this whole world of business, right? You get up, you get ready, you get out there, you don't know what's going to happen. The founder of Create and Cultivate and I launched a fund. That person really wanted to go into and create a wine brand, right?
You did start a wine brand, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a background in wine, so we went with it and we launched a wine company. During that time period, Wink, which was a company that was out there, which a lot of people know about, right? They filed for bankruptcy. So long story short, we went through this process to look at making a bid for the company. It didn't work out. But I ended up reaching out to somebody that I worked with before back in the day. His name is Louis Amoroso, and he's actually the co-founder of the beer Goose Island, which he had sold to Anheuser-Busch. And he is one of the best people in the country that I know of in regards to direct-to-consumer beer and wine. Him and I ended up, we talked and we said, listen, why don't we go ahead and roll up a bunch of these direct-to-consumer wine companies? And it comes back to what I was telling you before, right? There are certain people who can do the 0 to 3, 0 to 5 million, but then there's people like us who can say, listen, there's these phenomenal brands that are out there. How do we take them and put them under one roof? So we decided, so the fund was done, we're fully deployed. The founder was on to doing some other different projects. And so Louis and I said, let's put all these companies together. Let's get the funding, let's make it happen, and let's run with it. Rebecca, we did not overthink it. You don't know what's going to happen in life. It's just about going out there and taking steps. So we ended up acquiring Wink from Amass, who had bought them out of bankruptcy, but we just bought the direct-to-consumer arm. Then we bought another company called Wine Insiders, which was in October of 2023. And then last year in 2024 was our big acquisition year. In March, we bought a company called Bright Cellars. In June, we bought a company called Splash Wines. In August, we bought a company called Scout and Cellar. we bought the Cameron Hughes, Vanessa, and Windsor assets out of bankruptcy in October. And then right now in December, we closed on a company called Wine Access. So we did all of that in 18 months, and it has been such a roller coaster of a ride that if you would have asked me 3 years ago and said, Neha, are you going to go into wine? I would have probably said, why would I go into direct-to-consumer wine? And here we are. So it's about taking advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves. I think a lot of times things come our way, we hesitate, right? It's like if you're going skydiving, and you're right there about to jump out. If you hesitate, that hesitation creates a shift, but you just go. You know you're going, just go. And that's genuinely how we look at business. So we've put together Full Glass Wine. We have all these brands under our umbrella. We're anticipated to do, without any other acquisitions, anywhere between 225 to 250 million in revenue this year in 2025. And so we're definitely on a roller coaster of a ride. But back to your original question, is this a stop? Where am I? I think for the rest of my life, I'm going to be doing things. So if you look at that as a long enough time horizon, of course, there's going to be other things that I'm going to do. This is very fun and it's exciting, and we're scaling the business very, very fast. But I genuinely look at life. I always tell my husband, he's at Deloitte. And so it's almost as if my whole entire life is I'm moving from one department to another under the same umbrella. And that's our whole world and our ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. It's your department and it's your organization, and they're different, right? I mean, it's your life.
That's perfect. That's a perfect way to look at it, right? It's our life. And they're just different departments within our life.
Yep. So how would you give advice about being resilient? Because I'm sure that the last 18 months, I know for a fact you have to be resilient to go through what you were going through, having sold a company now 3 times. For me, what keeps you resilient?
The biggest thing for me is, and maybe you've heard this before, but what's the difference between courage and bravery? Bravery is you're just fearful, you go out there, you're strong, you go and do something. Courage is you might be worried, you might be scared, and you have that worry and fear come up in front of you. And it's doing what you know you need to do or you should be doing in spite of the fear that you have. I love what I do. I have fun with it. What keeps me resilient is remembering that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, your next question probably is, how do you know what you're supposed to be doing? I love it. It gets me excited. Every day, I can't wait to do what I'm doing. It is so hard what we are doing. It is nerve-wracking. It is crushing. Like, I have had days where in the middle of a transaction, we were closing this last transaction, and I felt like I could feel the pain in my chest. We now have 90 employees. If I make a mistake or I do something, so much of what I'm doing will fall to other people. Like, there's challenges and it's hard, but I feel alive.
Yeah.
And that aliveness is a reminder for me that I am up to something, and I need to have that courage to keep moving forward with whatever it is I need to do. The other thing for me that's also shifted in the past so many years and really helped with the resilience is having my kids, and then specifically my daughter. I remember when we were selling Create and Cultivate, we took photos for a potential photo shoot, right, if we're going to sell the company. I was like 34 weeks pregnant, and I got very sick when I was pregnant, so I put on a lot of weight. And I remember when the article came out in Forbes, and there was a photo of me and the way I looked in it. And I don't really talk about this with people, but I hated the way I looked, right, in that photo. And it was my first time seeing myself really like that. And it was COVID too, so you didn't really see yourself all the time except on Zoom, right? But you don't see the whole body. I put on so much weight, and I was embarrassed of it. And I remember talking to my OBGYN for a follow-up appointment. And he said, "Oh, did your article come out?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't like the way I look." And I showed it to him. You know what he said to me? He said, "Ava's in the photo with you. That's so cool." Like, my daughter he said, "There's 3 of you in the photo."
Yeah.
And then that immediately was a perspective shift for me. I'm not going to allow those types of things to get in my way. I want to be a stand for who I need to be, for the type of woman I need to be, so I can be that representation for my daughter. She was with me during the transaction, the sale of the company. She was literally born during the time. We did the closing call on Zoom, and I was nursing her at the time of the closing call. And I didn't realize everybody could hear her, but they could, and so that's for me, what's the resilience? It's remembering what is important to you and holding on to it.
I'm so glad you shared that, because I think when we can achieve that perspective shift, it just changes, you shift your viewpoint on something and immediately it changes. I could look at every failure as a failure or as a learning opportunity, or, or the challenges that I'm currently facing now in business could be, opportunity for disruption, versus, oh shit, this world is moving faster than we're prepared for. So I love that you shared that. And I love that it was with your baby, because I feel like sometimes a man will never know our experience, but it's at those moments that you're like, wow, they will never get the dichotomy of the nursing and the biggest deal of your life at the time. And, the strength that you have to go through that.
This is amazing. And I just think it's really important for everyone just to remember to get out there and try things. And so I do a 6-month period. I say, this is what I want to accomplish in 6 months. If anyone's ever worried on trying something different or doing it, just do it for 30 days. Don't hesitate. Get out there and give it a try.
Yeah. And 6 months, I think, allows a not finality to things. Like you can get
Yes.
like, oh, I have to do this for 5 years. I'm going to pull my brains out.
Yeah, Rebecca, that's actually what I love about teaching too. So we're on a quarter-based system, and there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's something that's beautiful about knowing that there's an end as well. And then you have a restart with new ideas, new people, new things. And so for me, the 6 months is I tell myself, I'm going to go all out on these couple components on the next 6 months. And if it doesn't work out, I just readjust.
Yep. I love it. Okay. So last 2 questions. Any piece of advice you'd either like to pass on that you learned from someone else that was helpful, or that you have learned yourself that what you want to pass on?
Yeah, one of the biggest things for me that I've learned is to really, really have fun and find joy. Wherever you are or whatever challenges you're having, even if it's you have a challenge with your business right now and you're ready for the disruption, or there's something else going on, in 5, 10 years, you will look back and you will miss this time period. I already look back and I miss the time period where I had so much difficulty when I had a newborn that was a colic baby and we were doing so many different things. I already look back and I miss that. I see the old photos and videos and I just want to hug him. But I genuinely believe you have to find the ways and create the ways to have fun. My kids, they remind me of that constantly. My daughter just wants to have dance parties all the time. She's 4, right? She just wants to have fun. And she says all the time, Mom, play with me. Somewhere along the way in life, Rebecca, a lot of us just forgot to play.
Yeah. I need to definitely do some more playing.
When I was in high school, my nickname was Nerdy Neha.
Why?
I was Indian. I grew up in Orange County. My name was different for a lot of people to say. And so a lot of people would say that, and it really hurt and it really bothered me. And the interesting thing is that, you either can take the things that hurt and you can, allow them to kind of get to you and really get in the way of the things that you're doing, or you can somehow take those things and you can, allow them to, there's, real quick, have you ever watched the show Game of Thrones?
No, I should have, but my husband watched it all and I would fall asleep. So I lost the plot.
There was a scene where basically there's a guy whose name is Tyrion, and he says, I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly right, but he basically says you can either take the things that people say negatively about you and you can allow it to destroy you, or you can make it a shield and you can make it your armor and you can wear it with pride. And so I grew up in a place where no one could really say my name. I didn't see my name anywhere. The volley now, you see it everywhere. Everybody knows what it is. For me, when I was growing up, it was something that a lot of people would tease and make fun of, right? Bright clothes, colorful things. But I think the biggest thing here and what would surprise anyone about me is just how much I had to essentially go through, growing up as a South Asian person down in Orange County, and what I'm able to now do with that. It's amazing. My son's name is Inder. He's named after Inderjeet, my grandpa. And you would think that after everything I went through, I would have maybe given him something a little bit different. But having said that, it was nice to be able to hold to my, family's heritage and bring something in.
I love hearing that. And I love that in spite of everything, you found a way to, like you said, turn it into your shield. It's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. If people want to support or buy the wine, so they go to fullglasswineco.com and then they can see your
yes.
portfolio.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, if anybody would like to check us out, Full Glass Wine Co. has all of our various brands that are listed out there, and they're a phenomenal array of brands that really meets multiple different consumer segments, and that's the point. So it's basically going from people that are new wine buyers to people who want to get something that's different. So we have a discovery platform as well, to people who might want special occasion wines. My mother-in-law has a very refined palate, and so when she is over, I like to make sure that we have special occasion wines. But it's a different type of wine that I'll have if I'm essentially bringing a bunch of my friends over together and we want to, have a good number of drinks.
Right. I love it. Well, I guess that's it. I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I also want to ask you to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it actually helps with search and algorithms. So if you love this podcast, it is an easy way to get it more visible and out there. I also want you to follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff, at RM Superwomen, and be sure to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. Thank you again, and you will hear from me next week.